There's a lot to be said about both these readings. I always try to balance out saying more than needs to be said here. We have St. Maximilian Kolbe, who's worth preaching on. We have the prophecy of Ezekiel, which is just chock full of useful things for today, along with Jesus here. We'll start with Jesus because if one or two of these three things need to be neglected, it certainly shouldn't be Jesus. So Jesus is teaching us, in a sense, the proper way to love each other. He's not saying that to love one another you all have to get along. I think that's an important thing to recognize. To be good Christians doesn't mean that we like each other, and it doesn't mean that we agree with each other on any particular given matter. There are important things that we do need to agree on, and that's what makes us Christians. But everything else we can disagree on, and disagree vehemently, and not like each other for that. That's totally fine, y'all. We get wrapped up in the sentimentality of Disney kumbayaism, and we think that if there's strife in our relationships, that there's a moral problem. That's not true. That's not true. There can be people in your life who you love and don't like. Because love is a choice. So I'm going to choose to love you. And what does it mean in this case that Jesus is talking about here to love a person? To love a person, first of all, he says, don't gossip about them. Don't tell other people why you don't like a thing that they did if you haven't first gone and talked to them about doing the thing that you don't like. Sometimes we gossip about people who do things we don't like because we know they're right, and if we go and talk to them, we'll be shamed. Right? I don't like what you did there. Well, this is why I did it, because it was right. Oh. And it's kind of embarrassing for us. Right? Other times we don't go and talk to that person, even if we think we're right, and we just talk about them because we don't love them enough. We don't care if they're wrong. We're actually glad they're wrong, because I get to go and tell other people that I know they're wrong and I'm right. Both of these situations are not necessarily the antithesis of love. But they're pretty close. They're antithetical to what it means to show charity, right? And remember, when Christians talk about love, we don't talk about sentimentality, right? Here's the kind of love that God shows. Pass through the city after him and strike. Do not look on them with pity or show mercy. Old men, kill them. Youths and maidens, kill them too. Women and children, wipe them out. Right? Who's he talking about? He's talking about those who have made them his enemy. And what's he say to those who have made themselves his friends? Do not strike one who has the mark of the thou on their forehead. They are my friend. Why? What made them his friend? Did they do anything particularly Did they do anything particularly good? Well, if you're reading Ezekiel here, they didn't do anything particularly good. Boy, she's got a set of lungs. They didn't do anything particularly good. They bemoaned the evil that was being done. And how many times do we think to ourselves, our political order is our salvation, and if things don't go well, we're doomed? No, not at all. If we speak out against the evil that the majority are doing, we will be saved. That will be credited to us as a good act. We're not going to be lumped in with everybody who's doing evil. If we stand up, the lone Christian, in a conversation, an overwhelming conversation, if we find ourselves necessarily in a group of people who think murdering a baby is ever a good thing in order to get out of a bad situation, and we say, hey, that's not right, But we're overcome by the volume of people that are there and the degree to which they believe that, and we're overpowered, and we have no sway in that situation, and the conversation ends with some sort of conclusion that abortion is a good idea. We are not united to them. We're not going to be lumped in by God's judgment with them, if we happen to be in that. Now, he doesn't want us to be in that, right? There is a point here where he says, if you try to correct somebody, if you try to correct them because you love them, right? You do it the right way, and they refuse, then treat them as you would a tax collector or a Gentile. Now, let me ask you, does Jesus want us to treat everybody nicely? How many of you go around with the 5-year-old kindergarten understanding that Jesus wants us to treat everybody nice? You don't have to raise your hand on that because it'll be embarrassing for you in a second here, right? He does not. Neither do the apostles. Christianity makes a clear distinction between those of the household of God, Christians, and non-Christians. We are to love everyone, but we do not have to treat everyone with the same degree of affection. Jesus says here, if a person refuses to remain a member of the church, treat them like a tax collector. How do we treat tax collectors? How would you treat a tax collector? Now, this is rubbing some of you the wrong way, and that's a great thing because you need some of those old hippy-dippy bumps to be rubbed down. Because that's not Christianity. Both Ezekiel and Jesus, through the words of Matthew here, are showing you that God is not sentimental. He doesn't love babies because they're cute and cuddly, like we do. Right? He doesn't take pity on an old person because they can't kneel down or walk straight anymore. He treats people like people, regardless of their age, their infirmity, their nationality, their level of intelligence. And that's a good thing, y'all. That's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that our God is a boogeyman. I'm allowing him to transcend beyond our tiny, myopic little ways of thinking. My ways are not your ways, says the Lord. If a righteous man lives a righteous life and in the end commits sin, am I to pardon him? No, says the Lord, right? And you're like, oh, but Lord, your ways are unfair. And he says, is it my ways that are unfair or your ways that are unfair? The beautiful thing here is this, guys, that people can unite themselves to the evils of this world, and it does not enslave us. We remain free. We who see evil, who see a thief and do not go with them. We who see evil, and though we are not powerful to stop the evil, who stand up and nevertheless point it out and say, that's evil. I don't have the power to stop the transgender culture. I don't. Nor do I have the power to stop the normalization of homosexuality. I don't. Nor do I have the power to reach into everybody's marriage and prevent this epidemic of divorce, which abuses children and strips away the dignity of the love that God wishes to have between himself and humanity. I don't have the power to do that, but dang it, I'm going to stand up here anytime it's required. I'm going to say it in a restaurant. I'm going to say it in a grocery store. I'm going to say it in my office when people come and they want to tell me how I said something that they disagreed with. I'm going to tell them every single time in every single place that these things are wrong. And when the Lord returns, he might still condemn me, but he's not going to condemn me for that. The way that we engage the evil in the world then is this, on a one-to-one scale, particularly for us. When your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault, go and tell her her fault between you and her alone. The number of times that people don't like me and go tell Father Tim about it, and Father Tim just says, have you talked to him about it? That should really shame people. Because that is, they have been shown to be living a life in an unchristian, they're approaching this problem in an unchristian way. Right? Sadly, it doesn't shame them into doing it right. They just push it down and let it continue to fester rather than solving the problem because they don't love me enough. They don't love me enough to come and tell me what the issue is because I might be wrong and it might be a service to me because I might hear it and be like, oh man, you guys are right. Sorry about that. But people don't love me that much because I'm a flat cardboard figure for a lot of people, a grumpy one. Right? Hey, that's on you. Right? That's on you. I'm willing to have hard conversations. And I'm not just talking about me. People do this with Father Tim too. People do this about y'all. I hear people complain to me about y'all all the time. And I'm like, well, have you gone and talked to him about it yet? No. Okay, you hater. You hateful, spiteful person. Change your ways. Be a lover. Be a lover. Go and love that person and tell them the hard thing that they need to hear. And if they don't listen to you, that's okay. You haven't failed. It doesn't make you wrong. If you go and tell somebody the truth and they don't believe you, it doesn't mean you're wrong, and it doesn't undermine the truth. It just means that they're stubborn and they're not going to listen to you. Okay, that's on them. You have not failed. If you go do the loving thing and people don't respond to that, if you go and seek reconciliation and they won't be reconciled, if you go and speak the truth and they continue in their error, you have not failed. You have succeeded because for your part, you have loved them. And that's what God asks us to do. It is not our responsibility whether or not at the end of our conversation with them they've become some great saint or that they've walked away from the church. That is not on us. What is on us is what is incumbent upon us is to go and to love that person the way that Jesus tells us to love them. He tells us to love people a lot of different ways. In this way in particular, he tells us how to love somebody when we get into conflict with them. He doesn't tell us that getting into conflict with somebody is sinful. He says when you do get into conflict, he presumes this. When you do get into conflict with people you spend time with, when you do get into conflict with people you love, when you do get into conflict with other Christians, this is how you're going to love them. Go and tell them one-on-one. And then, hey, look, if they don't listen, because they're just like, hey, that's your opinion. Hey, bro, I disagree, right? Some people's favorite line when priest tells them what the truth is, they're like, well, I disagree. Okay. You go ahead and do that if you want. That's not on me. Take 2 or 3 people with you. Take 2 or 3 people with you so that the reality can be established, so that it no longer is simply somebody's opinion, but it now has the weight, at least of public opinion, if not the weight of reality, right? Take those people with you so that can be established. And why are we doing this? We're not doing this to prove to that person that we're right and they're wrong. We're doing it so that they can be good, so that they can be right. We don't have any pride. If we go into this with pride, we're only going to do damage. We have to go in it with a desire to present them with the truth so that they can say yes to it, right? And then if that doesn't work, tell the church. And this is where Jesus starts to really kind of talk about more ecclesial, like on an ecclesial level here, right? Tell the bishop, because the bishop will be able to determine. The bishop has the authority to say yes, this is, or no, this is not. And then if that person listens, they're excommunicated. Right, they're excommunion. And we talk about that as a big, scary word. Essentially, anytime you commit grave sin, you're excommunicated, right? Anytime we cut ourselves off from the life of grace and the community of the people. You realize the community of the people and the communion are the same thing. If you can't come up here and receive communion, you're not a member of this community. If you can't come up here and receive Holy Communion because of some grave sin or because of a lifestyle you're living, you are not part of this community. And what does Jesus say of those who are not part of this community? Treat them as you would a Gentile or a tax collector. Why? Because those people are not members of the community. He doesn't say go out and kill them. He says don't associate with them. Right? Don't even open your door to them. They have chosen their part. They've chosen their lot. Right? Now, when we have friends who have started in that position because they were born into a 500-year tradition of ungodliness, in Protestant communions, we want to gently waft the sweet aroma of the sacraments of the church and the Holy Spirit towards them to draw them in. But when somebody who already is a member of the church, the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, apostatizes, turns their back either morally or socially on the church, you are excommunion. You're not a member of my family anymore. You're not a member of my household, right? When we start looking at people who are drawing their social and charitable lines with their community, their human lines, their relationship lines with people based on political partisanship, what you're going to start seeing is that people are choosing the world over God, much more so than they are choosing the left versus the right, right? If somebody is more interested in left versus right, they are less interested in God versus the world. Right? Less interested in God and more interested in the world, right? And so it's important for us as we get as the sort of political climate ramps up more and more and more, that we're very careful to step back and not see the world in danger right now any more than it ever is. What we have to do is see ourselves as those who will stand up and call out what is evil on any side of the aisle. That's wrong. That's an evil thing. I'm not doing that. I'm having no part of that. I have no truck with that, right? But then being able to love the person who may disagree with us on a political matter as a person. And if they are committing some grave moral sin, let's say they're in danger of committing the sin of associating themselves with a party whose platform is the wholesale murder of children in order to get out of uncomfortable situations for the mother or the father, you need to reach out to them and you need to say, hey, man, you really shouldn't do that. That's an evil thing. Instead, you need to stand up and say, that's evil. That's what you need to do. Right? This is the way we live our lives as Christians. It is not nice. It's not clean. It's not sweet. It's difficult. It's messy. It's a combat. Because we're always fighting against the world. Always. Until kingdom come. So steel yourselves with the true charity of Christians. Not the sentimental love of Disney, but the true steely charity of Christians who want to see and are willing to bend themselves, like Maximilian Kolbe, at the hands of torturers and murderers for the sake of the salvation of those whom we profess to love.